The recovery room was supposed to be safe. That's what they tell you before surgery. You'll wake up groggy, surrounded by nurses. Everything will be fine. But I wasn't waking up. I was already awake. My eyes wouldn't open. My fingers wouldn't move. I could hear everything, feel everything, but my body was a prison. And that's when I heard my nephew Garrett's voice cutting through the beeping machines like a knife. If her heart stops, let her go. The doctor's voice came next, uncertain. Mr. Caldwell, that's not typically how we... I'm her power of attorney. Garrett's tone turned sharp, businesslike. I have the papers right here. My Aunt Marianne is 67 years old. She's lived a full life. If complications happen during recovery, do not resuscitate. Let nature take its course. My mind screamed. My body betrayed me with silence. I tried to move my hand, tried to open my eyes, tried to make any sound that would tell them I was here. I was listening, I was alive, and I wanted to stay that way. Nothing. The paralysis from the anesthesia held me captive in my own flesh. I understand you have legal authority, the doctor said slowly. But your aunt is stable right now. There's no indication. I'm just making sure everyone knows my wishes for her. Garrett's voice moved closer to my bed. I felt his presence, could smell his cologne. The same cologne I'd bought him for Christmas 3 months ago. She wouldn't want to be a vegetable. She told me that herself. I never said that. I never said anything like that. We'll note it in her chart, the doctor said quietly. Footsteps retreated. A door closed. I was alone with Garrett. His hand touched my arm, and my skin crawled beneath his fingers. Sorry, Aunt Marianne, he whispered. Nothing personal. But that house in Riverside is worth $800,000, and I've got debts you wouldn't believe. You've had a good run. He patted my hand twice, like I was already a corpse. Then his phone rang. He stepped away, and I heard him answer. Blake, baby. Yeah, I'm at the hospital now. She's out cold, won't know a thing. He laughed. A sound I'd heard 1,000 times at family barbecues, birthday parties, Thanksgiving dinners. Now it curdled my blood. The house goes on the market next week. I already talked to a realtor. We'll have that Hawaii trip booked by March, I promise. My sister's son. The boy I'd helped raise after she died. The young man I'd given money to when he lost his job, when his car broke down, when he needed a security deposit for his apartment. I'd signed those power of attorney papers 2 months ago because he'd said, Aunt Marianne, you're getting older. What if something happens and nobody can make medical decisions for you? I just want to protect you. Protect me. He'd looked me right in the eyes and said those words. The machines around me beeped their steady rhythm. My heart was still beating. My lungs still pulling air. But in Garrett's mind, I was already gone. Already his payday. His voice drifted back into focus. Yeah, the pension transfers to the estate. Plus she's got about $200,000 in savings. Her financial advisor sent me the statements last week. I told him I was helping her organize her affairs. Another laugh. Old people are so trusting. Something ignited in my chest. Not my heart stopping, the opposite. Rage, pure and burning, flooded through me like electricity. I'd spent 43 years as a school principal. I'd handled budget crises, difficult parents, problem students who tried every trick in the book. I'd survived losing my husband Thomas 2 years ago to cancer. I'd rebuilt my life from grief. And this entitled, spoiled, greedy little vulture thought he could cash in on my death. I focused every ounce of will I had into my right index finger. Move, move, move. It twitched. A nurse's voice broke through. Sir, I need to check her vitals. Of course, Garrett said smoothly, the loving nephew again. I'll just step outside. Take good care of her. The nurse's footsteps approached. Her hand lifted my wrist, checking my pulse. I concentrated on that finger again. Another twitch. Then another. Dr. Chen, the nurse called out sharply. Her fingers moving. She might be coming out of it faster than expected. Hope and terror crashed together in my paralyzed body. If I woke up now, Garrett would know I'd heard everything. He'd know I knew his plan. What would he do then? And if I didn't wake up, if my body slipped back under, would he find a way to finish what he'd started? The heart monitor's beeping started to climb, faster, faster. An alarm began to sound. Get the doctor.
Now.
The nurse's hand gripped mine. Mrs. Caldwell, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand. I squeezed with everything I had. And somewhere in the hallway outside, I heard Garrett's footsteps stop. Hey, before we go any further, if you're already hooked on Marianne's story, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Now, let's get back to how this nightmare actually started. My name is Marianne Caldwell, and 67 years old never felt like a death sentence until my own nephew decided it should be. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand who I was before that hospital bed, before the betrayal, before everything fell apart. I was the woman who had it figured out. Retired school principal, widow, homeowner in one of Riverside's nicest neighborhoods. My house, the one Garrett was already planning to sell, was a 3-bedroom craftsman with a wraparound porch that Thomas and I had bought in 1987. We'd painted every room ourselves, planted the Japanese maple in the front yard, installed the kitchen backsplash tile by tile. After Thomas died from pancreatic cancer, I'd thought about selling. Too many memories, too much empty space. But our financial advisor, Martin, had told me the property value had tripled. $890,000 at last appraisal. That's your safety net, Marianne, he'd said.
Keep it.
You've got your pension, your savings, and equity if you ever need it. I'd taught elementary school for 43 years. Seen thousands of kids walk through my office door, some with scraped knees, some with bigger problems at home. I'd learned to read people, to spot a lie, to sense when something was off. That skill served me well as principal. I'd thought it would protect me in retirement too. I was wrong. Garrett started showing up more often about 6 months ago. My sister Linda's only child, 32 years old, with his father's dark hair and his mother's smile. Linda had died when Garrett was 15, car accident on the interstate during a rainstorm, and I'd stepped in where I could. Helped with college application fees, sent birthday checks, attended his graduation. We weren't incredibly close, but we were family. The kind that saw each other at holidays and kept in touch through occasional texts. Then last April, he appeared on my doorstep on a Tuesday afternoon with coffee from my favorite cafe and a story about getting laid off from his job in pharmaceutical sales. The whole division got cut, he'd said, sitting at my kitchen table. 20 people just like that. I'm trying to figure out my next move. I'd made sympathetic sounds, offered encouragement. You're young, Garrett. You'll land on your feet. I hope so. He'd smiled, but it hadn't reached his eyes. Hey, Aunt Marianne, can I ask you something?
I just worry about you. He'd reached across the table, squeezed my hand. You're alone in this big house. What if you fell, or had a medical emergency, and nobody could make decisions for you? I've been reading about elder care, and it's scary how many seniors end up with the state making choices because they didn't plan ahead. Elder care. Seniors. Words that made me feel ancient. I have a will, I'd said. Thomas and I set everything up years ago. But who's your power of attorney for medical stuff? I'd hesitated. I'm not sure I have one anymore. It was Thomas, but obviously. Let me help you. Garrett's voice had been so earnest, so genuine. I'll research it, find the right documents. You just need someone you trust to make medical decisions if you can't. It's not about dying, it's about protection. That word again. Protection. Looking back now, I can see the manipulation so clearly. The way he'd planted seeds of fear about being alone, being vulnerable, being elderly. The way he'd positioned himself as the caring nephew, the responsible family member stepping up. But in that moment, sitting in my sunny kitchen with Linda's son across from me, I'd only felt grateful. That's sweet of you to worry, I'd said. He'd started visiting every week after that. Always bringing coffee, always asking about my health, always mentioning something he'd read about estate planning or medical directives. The visits felt good at first. The house was so quiet since Thomas died. My best friend Patricia lived across town and had grandkids who kept her busy. Most of my teacher friends had moved or were dealing with their own aging parents. Garrett's attention made me feel less invisible. I should have questioned why he never talked about job interviews. Should have wondered why he always steered conversations back to my finances, my property, my plans. Should have noticed how he'd subtly discouraged me when I mentioned having dinner with Patricia or taking a watercolor class at the senior center. "You need to save your energy, Aunt Marianne," he'd say. "You're not 25 anymore." In July, he'd brought the papers. Power of attorney documents, medical directives, all printed out and flagged with sticky notes showing where to sign. "I had my lawyer friend draw these up," he'd said. "No charge. Just want to make sure you're protected." We'd been at a restaurant. He'd taken me to lunch at the Italian place downtown. Wine had been involved. I'd been relaxed, happy to have company, trusting the nephew who'd seemed so concerned about my well-being. I'd signed them over linguine and garlic bread. "You're doing the smart thing," Garrett had assured me, tucking the papers into his messenger bag. "Now I can make sure you get the best care if anything ever happens." If anything ever happens. How careful he'd been with his words, never saying when, always if. Making it sound distant, theoretical, unlikely. 3 months later, my hip started bothering me. Years of standing in classrooms, walking school hallways, chasing kids on playgrounds had finally caught up. My doctor recommended replacement surgery. "It's routine now," Dr. Morrison had said. "You'll be walking better than you have in years." I'd called Garrett to let him know, just keeping family informed. He'd insisted on driving me to the hospital, helping with the pre-op appointments, being there for the surgery. "You can't drive yourself home after anesthesia," he'd said. "Let me handle it." Patricia had offered too, but Garrett had already cleared his schedule. "I've got it covered, Aunt Marianne. Patricia doesn't need to rearrange her whole day." The morning of the surgery, he'd picked me up at 5:30 a.m. I'd been nervous, chattering to fill the silence. He'd been quiet, focused on the road, his jaw tight. "You okay?" I'd asked. "Just want to get you there safely." He'd glanced at me. "Did you eat or drink anything? They're strict about that." "Not since midnight, just like they said." "Good." His hands had tightened on the steering wheel. "Everything's going to be fine." At the hospital, he'd checked me in, answered the intake questions, handed over insurance cards. When the pre-op nurse asked who'd be my emergency contact during surgery, he'd said, "I'm her power of attorney," before I could speak. The nurse had smiled at him. "How wonderful that she has family here." I'd smiled too, squeezing his hand. "I'm lucky." The anesthesiologist had come in, explained the procedure, the risks, the recovery. Garrett had asked detailed questions about complications, survival rates, what happened if things went wrong. I'd thought he was being thorough, protective. Now I knew he'd been planning. They'd wheeled me toward the operating room, and the last thing I'd seen was Garrett standing in the hallway, hands in his pockets. He'd given me a small wave. Something in his expression had made me uneasy for just a moment. Something cold behind his eyes. Then the anesthesia had pulled me under, and I'd thought, "It's just nerves, he loves you, it's going to be fine." I'd woken up to him signing my death warrant. The surgery itself went perfectly. Dr. Morrison told me later that the hip replacement was textbook, no complications, everything by the numbers. She'd installed the titanium joint, closed me up, and sent me to recovery expecting a standard post-op progression. What she didn't expect was the patient's next of kin already planning the funeral. But I'm jumping ahead again. Let me take you back to those first hours after I heard Garrett's voice in the recovery room. The hospital kept me for 3 days of observation. Standard protocol for hip replacement, especially for someone my age. Garrett visited every day, twice a day, playing the devoted nephew for the nurses. He'd bring flowers, adjust my pillows, ask the staff questions about my pain medication and physical therapy schedule. To anyone watching, he was the perfect family member. I played along. I had to. "See, here's what they don't tell you about anesthesia awareness. It doesn't just go away the second you can move again." The paralysis lifted gradually, over an hour or so. First my finger, then my hand, then my arm. By the time I could open my eyes, Garrett had left the recovery room. When he came back 2 hours later, I was groggy enough to sell the performance. Aunt Marianne. He'd taken my hand gently. How are you feeling? Tired, I'd mumbled. It wasn't hard to sound weak. I was weak. The surgery had taken everything out of me, and the horror of what I'd heard had drained whatever reserves I had left. Where am I? Hospital. You just had your hip surgery, remember? Everything went great. I'd let my eyes drift closed. I can't remember much. That's normal. The anesthesia messes with your memory. His thumb rubbed across my knuckles. Don't worry about anything. I'm taking care of everything. Those words made my stomach turn, but I kept my face neutral, kept my breathing even. If he knew that I knew, I had no idea what he'd do. And in that hospital bed, unable to walk, barely able to think straight through the pain medication, I was completely vulnerable. The nurses loved him. I heard them talking at the station outside my room. That nephew of hers is so attentive, one said. You don't see that much anymore. He's been here every visiting hour, another agreed. Asking all the right questions about her care. If only they knew what questions he'd been asking. If only they'd heard him tell the doctor to let me die.
Patricia called my room on the second day. Garrett answered before I could reach the phone. Hey Patricia. Yeah, she's doing okay. Pretty out of it still, but that's expected. His voice was warm, friendly. The surgery went well. She's just resting a lot. I could hear Patricia's voice through the phone, asking to visit. The doctor said to keep visitors limited for the first few days, Garrett said smoothly. Too much stimulation can slow recovery. But I'll tell her you called. I'm sure she'll want to see you once she's feeling better. He hung up before I could protest. Before I could scream into the phone that I needed her, that something was wrong, that I was in danger. Patricia sends her love, he told me, setting the phone back on the bedside table. I told her you'd call when you're up for company. I want to see her, I said. My voice came out raspy, weak. Soon. He poured water into my cup, held the straw to my lips. You need to focus on getting strong first. Too many visitors will wear you out. He was isolating me, cutting me off from anyone who might question him, who might notice something wrong. And trapped in that bed, dependent on nurses for every basic need, I couldn't stop him. That night, I stared at the ceiling and took inventory of my situation. My body was wrecked, hips screaming despite the pain medication, muscles weak from the surgery, and the enforced bed rest. My mind was foggy from the drugs. My phone was on the table, but Garrett had set it face down, and I'd need to lean far to reach it. Even if I called Patricia, what would I say? That my nephew had told a doctor not to resuscitate me? Garrett had the legal papers. He was my power of attorney. Would anyone even believe me? I needed proof. I needed allies. And I needed to be smart about this, because one wrong move and Garrett might decide not to wait for nature to take its course. The next morning brought a small miracle disguised as a 26-year-old nursing assistant named Chelsea Winters. She came in to check my vitals while Garrett was down in the cafeteria, and something about her reminded me of the young teachers I used to mentor. Sharp eyes, quick mind, the kind of person who noticed things others missed. How's your pain level today, Mrs. Caldwell? She wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm. Manageable. I watched her face carefully. Chelsea, can I ask you something? Of course. Yesterday, in recovery, was anyone else in the room with me? Besides medical staff? Her hands paused for just a second. Your nephew was there for a bit. Why? I took a risk. Did you hear what he said to the doctor? Chelsea's expression shifted. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Maybe concern. I wasn't in recovery yesterday, but I can check the notes if you want.
No.
I said it too quickly, and her eyebrows rose. I softened my voice. I'm having trouble remembering. The anesthesia. She finished taking my blood pressure, wrote numbers on her clipboard. But before she left, she leaned in close and said quietly, if you need anything, and I mean anything, you can tell me. Okay. Those words cracked something open in my chest. She'd seen something. Noticed something. I wasn't imagining the danger. There's a woman named Patricia Holbrook, I whispered. She's my emergency contact. In my chart. Can you? Chelsea's hand squeezed mine once, quick and reassuring. I'll look into it. She left just as Garrett returned with coffee and a breakfast sandwich. He settled into the chair beside my bed like he owned it, like he belonged there, like he wasn't counting down the days until he could put my house on the market. Feeling better today? He asked. A little. I managed a weak smile. Thank you for being here. Where else would I be? He bit into his sandwich. Your family. Family. The word tasted like poison now. He pulled out his phone, started scrolling. I watched him from the corner of my eye. This man I'd once trusted. This stranger wearing my nephew's face. His screen showed a real estate website. Listings in Hawaii. Ocean view condos. Resort properties. Our future vacation spot. Funded by my death. My hip throbbed. My head ached. But underneath the pain and the medication haze, something cold and hard was forming. I'd spent 4 decades dealing with people who lied, who cheated, who thought they were smarter than everyone else. I'd handled parents who tried to bully teachers, students who forged signatures, administrators who played political games. I knew how to spot a con. I knew how to build a case. And Garrett had no idea who he was messing with. That afternoon, he left to run some errands. The second he was gone, Chelsea appeared in my doorway. I called Patricia Holbrook, she said, glancing over her shoulder. She's on her way. I told her to come through the staff entrance and not to mention it at the main desk. Why? I struggled to sit up straighter. Chelsea's jaw tightened. Because your nephew told the front desk that you're not supposed to have visitors except him, said doctor's orders. She met my eyes. But there's nothing in your chart about limiting visitors. And I checked the recovery notes. I saw what was documented about the DNR conversation. My breath caught. And I think you need to talk to your friend. Fast. She adjusted my bed, helped me into a more comfortable position. I've seen this before, Mrs. Caldwell. More times than I'd like. Usually it's adult children, but nephews work the same way. They get power of attorney and suddenly they're making decisions that benefit them, not the patient. He wants my house, I said quietly. My savings. Everything. I figured. Chelsea's face was grim. Patricia will be here in 20 minutes. I'll make sure you two have privacy. But Mrs. Caldwell, you need to document everything. Every conversation. Every weird comment. Every time he tries to isolate you. And you need a lawyer. I have a lawyer. Donald Reardon, downtown. Good. Get Patricia to call him. She checked the hallway again. Your nephew seems like he'll be back around dinner time, based on his pattern. That gives you a few hours. She left, and I was alone with my thoughts and my rage and my plan. 23 minutes later, Patricia burst into my room with tears streaming down her face and fury in her eyes. Marianne, what the hell is going on? That nurse said. She stopped, seeing my expression. Oh God. It's true. Every word. I held out my hand, and she grabbed it like a lifeline. Pat, I need your help. And I need you to stay calm, because if Garrett suspects anything, I don't know what he'll do. She pulled the chair close, leaned in. Tell me everything. So, I did. Every word I'd heard in the recovery room, every red flag I'd missed in the months before, every manipulation and lie. Patricia's face went from shock to horror to cold determination. That little bastard, she said when I finished. Linda would be ashamed. Linda raised him better than this. My voice cracked. I don't understand how. Money makes people monsters. Patricia pulled out her phone. I'm calling Donald right now. Wait. I grabbed her wrist. We need to be careful. Garrett has legal power of attorney. If we challenge him directly, he might find a way to... I couldn't finish the sentence, but Patricia understood. If Garrett thought I was going to expose him, what would stop him from making sure I had a convenient accident? Another fall, an infection, a medication error. Hospitals were dangerous places, and people died in them every day. Patricia's expression turned calculating. So, we don't challenge him directly. We investigate first, build a case, and then we strike all at once before he knows what hit him. She smiled grimly. You taught me that strategy, remember? When we dealt with that embezzling PDA treasurer back in '03. I did remember. We'd gathered evidence for 3 months before confronting her, documented every missing dollar, and by the time we went to the police, the case was airtight. But I'm stuck in this bed, I said. I can't exactly conduct an investigation from here. No, but I can. Patricia stood up, started pacing. I'll go to Donald's office today. We'll file emergency motions, get that power of attorney revoked, check your financial accounts for any suspicious activity. And Marianne? She turned back to me. You need to play dead. What? Not literally. She waved her hand. But you need to seem weaker than you are. Confused, forgetful, dependent. Make Garrett think his plan is working, that you're not a threat. Meanwhile, we build the case that destroys him. It was a good plan. A smart plan. The kind of long-game strategy that actually worked. There's one problem, I said slowly. If we revoke the power of attorney or freeze my accounts, Garrett will know immediately. We'll lose the element of surprise. Patricia bit her lip, thinking, What if we just monitor everything for now? Don't stop him, just document what he does. Every transaction, every phone call, every move he makes. Give him enough rope to hang himself. That's risky. Living with a nephew who wants you dead is risky. She squeezed my hand again. But we'll be careful. I'll have Donald file preliminary papers that don't go into effect until we say so, like a loaded gun we can fire when the time is right. And I'll check your accounts daily. If he tries to take more than small amounts, we shut it down immediately. I thought about it, weighing the dangers against the benefits. If we moved too soon, Garrett might get away with attempted exploitation, a slap on the wrist, maybe probation. But if we waited, documented his actions, caught him in the act of fraud, that was prison time. Okay, I said finally. But Pat, if anything happens to me, if anything seems off, I'm calling 911 and Donald simultaneously. She pulled out a small notebook from her purse. Now tell me everything again, and I'll write it down. Every detail, every exact word you remember. We're going to bury him. For the first time since waking up in that recovery room, I felt something other than fear and helplessness. I felt hope, and underneath that hope, burning bright and dangerous, I felt rage. Garrett thought I was just some naive old woman, easy to manipulate, easy to eliminate. He thought I'd spent my life in a safe little bubble of lesson plans and parent-teacher conferences, protected from the ugly realities of human greed. He forgot that I'd spent 43 years dealing with every kind of human behavior imaginable. I'd seen abuse, neglect, theft, violence. I'd learned to recognize predators in cheap suits and friendly smiles. I'd documented cases, testified in court, fought for kids who had no one else. And now I was going to fight for myself. Patricia and I talked for 2 hours, planning every detail. She left just before dinner, slipping out through the staff in trance the same way she'd come in. 30 minutes later, Garrett returned with takeout food and his concerned nephew smile. You're looking better, he said, setting a container of soup on my tray. Color's back in your face. I slept most of the afternoon. I lied. These pain medications knock me out. That's good. Rest is important. He settled into his chair, pulled out his phone again. So, I was thinking about when you're discharged. You'll need help at home for a few weeks, right? Physical therapy, getting around the house. My heart rate picked up. I suppose so. I found this great nursing facility. Not a nursing home, he added quickly, seeing my expression. More like a rehab center. You'd stay there for maybe 6 weeks, do intensive physical therapy, and then you'd be strong enough to go home. Or you'd be strong enough to be moved to a permanent facility where I'd have less control over what happened to me, I thought. Where you could visit less frequently, where the staff wouldn't know me well enough to notice if something was wrong. That sounds expensive, I said carefully. Your insurance covers most of it. And you can afford it, Aunt Marianne. You've got the savings. His voice was so reasonable, so caring. I just want what's best for you. I'll think about it. I took a sip of the soup he'd brought. It was lukewarm, tasteless. Everything tasted like cardboard through the fear. Can we talk about it later? I'm so tired. Of course. Rest. He stood up, kissed my forehead. His lips felt like ice against my skin. I'll be back tomorrow morning. Call if you need anything tonight. He left, and I sat in the gathering darkness of my hospital room, the city lights flickering to life outside my window. Somewhere out there, Patricia was meeting with Donald, starting the process that would save my life and destroy Garrett's plans. Somewhere in this hospital, Chelsea was documenting the conversation about DNR orders, adding notes to my file that would matter later. And here in this bed, I was making a choice. I could be a victim, or I could be a fighter. I'd been a fighter my whole life. I wasn't about to stop now. But as I drifted off to sleep that night, pain medication pulling me under, one thought chased me into dreams. How far would Garrett go to protect his scheme? And would I survive long enough to stop him? I'd been awake for 15 seconds, and I already knew something was wrong. Not wrong like before, not the terror of being trapped in my own body. This was different. My eyes were closed, my breathing was steady, but I was conscious. Fully, completely conscious. And I could hear voices at the end of my bed, Garrett's voice, and someone I didn't recognize. Keep breathing steady, I told myself. Don't move. Don't let them know. Talk to the anesthesiologist, the unfamiliar voice was saying. Male, older, clinical tone. She experienced some awareness during recovery. It's rare, but it happens, especially with patients her age. The body metabolizes the drugs differently. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face slack, my breathing even. So she was awake? Garrett's voice was tight. During recovery? When? Hard to say exactly. Could have been right after surgery, could have been later. The nurses noted finger movement earlier than expected, elevated heart rate. Classic signs. Oh God. Oh God. They were talking about me hearing him, about me being conscious, when he'd told the doctor to let me die.
But she doesn't remember anything, right? Garrett's voice had a new edge to it now. You said the drugs mess with memory. Usually, yes. Most patients have amnesia about the immediate post-operative period. But awareness cases are unpredictable. Some patients remember everything. Some remember nothing. Some remember fragments. Silence. I could feel Garrett staring at me, studying my face for any sign that I was listening. Has she said anything? To the nurses, to you, to anyone. Each word was carefully measured. Not to my knowledge. But I'm her surgeon, not her primary care physician during recovery. You'd have to ask the nursing staff. More silence. Then Garrett's voice, closer now, right beside my bed. Thanks, Dr. Morrison. I appreciate you keeping me informed. I just want to make sure she's getting the best care. Of course. Your aunt is lucky to have you. Lucky. That word again, twisted into something obscene. Footsteps retreated. A door opened and closed. I was alone with Garrett. I kept my eyes shut, kept my breathing steady, even though every instinct screamed at me to open my eyes and confront him. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not while I was helpless in this bed, unable to run, unable to fight, unable to do anything but lie here and play dead. His hand touched my arm. I forced myself not to flinch. Aunt Marianne, he said softly. I know you're tired. I know the surgery was hard. But I need you to know something. His fingers tightened. Not enough to hurt, but enough to make his point. I'm taking care of everything. All your finances, all your bills, all your decisions. You don't have to worry about a thing. Just rest. Just let go of all that stress. Let go. Such careful words. Such deliberate phrasing. Everything's going to be fine, he continued. The house, the money, all of it. I'm handling it. You've worked so hard your whole life. You deserve to rest now. You deserve peace. His hand left my arm. I heard him moving around the room, the scrape of the chair, the rustle of fabric. Was he sitting down? Getting comfortable for a long visit? Or was he looking for something? My phone, maybe, or anything else I might use to contact someone. Then his voice came again, but not directed at me. He was on his phone. Hey, it's me. Yeah, I'm at the hospital. Listen, we might need to move faster than we thought. A pause. The doctor said she might have been aware during part of the recovery. It's probably nothing, but another pause longer this time. I know, baby, I know. But if she remembers anything she heard, we could have a problem. My blood turned to ice. No, she hasn't said anything yet. She's been pretty out of it. But I'm going to. His voice dropped lower, harder to hear. I strained to catch the words. Talk to the nurses, see if she's mentioned anything. And I'll make sure she doesn't have much contact with anyone else. Patricia called yesterday, but I told her to wait a few days. He was talking to Blake. Planning. Strategizing. And the way he said move faster made my skin crawl. The papers are already filed, he continued. House goes on the market Thursday. I told the realtor we're doing it as a favor, helping her downsize for the nursing home. A bitter laugh. Yeah, they bought it completely. Why wouldn't they? I'm the caring nephew. Thursday. 3 days from now. He was selling my house in 3 days. Look, even if she does remember something, who's going to believe her? She's a 67-year-old woman on pain medication who just had major surgery. I have power of attorney. I have legal authority. She signed the papers herself. His voice was so casual, so confident. And if she becomes a real problem? Hospitals are dangerous places. Infections happen. Medication errors happen. People go in for hip surgery and don't come out all the time. I stopped breathing. He was talking about killing me. Not hypothetically. Not in some vague, distant future. He was actively discussing how to murder me if I became inconvenient. I'm not saying we'll need to go there, Garrett said, and I could hear him pacing now, his shoes squeaking on the linoleum. I'm just saying it's an option if things get messy. But it probably won't come to that. She's trusting, she's alone, and she's vulnerable. We just keep her isolated for another week or two, get the house sold, transfer the funds, and then, he stopped mid-sentence. I felt his presence beside the bed again. Watching me. Studying me. Don't move. Don't breathe different. Don't do anything. She's still out, he said finally. Dead to the world. Yeah, I'll call you tonight. Love you too. He hung up. Sat back down in the chair. And I lay there, trapped in my fake sleep, knowing that if I gave any indication I'd heard him, I might not make it through the night. Time became elastic. Minutes felt like hours. I had no idea how long he sat there, scrolling through his phone, occasionally shifting in his chair. All I knew was that my hip was screaming, my back was cramping, and I desperately needed to move. But I couldn't. Not yet. Finally, I heard him stand up. Sleep well, Aunt Marianne, he said. Then he left. I waited 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. When I was sure he was gone, I opened my eyes and sucked in a shaking breath. He'd just threatened to kill me. In my hospital room. While I was lying right there. And the worst part? He was right about one thing. Who would believe me? I was on pain medication. I'd just had surgery. I had no proof, no recording, no witnesses. It would be my word against his, and he had power of attorney documents with my signature on them. But he'd made one mistake. He'd told me exactly what he was planning. And now I knew the timeline. Thursday. I had until Thursday to stop him from selling my house. I reached for the call button with shaking hands, pressed it 3 times. Chelsea appeared 2 minutes later. Mrs. Caldwell? Are you okay? You look. I need to see Patricia, I whispered. Right now. And I need you to call my lawyer, Donald Reardon. His number is in my phone. I grabbed her hand. Chelsea, Garrett just threatened my life. He doesn't know I heard him, but he's planning to. If I don't cooperate, he's going to. Slow down. She closed the door, came to my bedside. What did he say exactly? I told her everything. The conversation with Dr. Morrison, the phone call with Blake, the casual discussion of making my death look like a hospital accident. Chelsea's face went from concerned to horrified to furiously angry. That son of a, She caught herself, took a breath. Okay. First, we're documenting this. Right now. I'm writing down everything you just told me with timestamps. Then I'm calling your friend and your lawyer. And then I'm talking to hospital security. Security. If he's threatening a patient, he can be barred from visiting. We take that seriously here. She pulled out her phone, started typing notes. But Mrs. Caldwell, you need to understand, this is serious. If he thinks you're a threat, if he thinks you know what he's planning. I know. My voice was steadier now, the fear transforming into something harder, colder. That's why we have to move fast. He's selling my house on Thursday. 2 days from now? 3. Something that will stand up in court.
She bit her lip, thinking, what if we recorded him? If you could get him to repeat those threats, admit what he's planning.
How?
I don't have my phone. I do. She pulled it out. I can set up a voice recording app, hide the phone in your room. Next time he visits, engage him in conversation. Get him talking about the house, the money, the power of attorney. People like him love to brag once they think they've won. It was risky. So risky. But it might be our only shot. Do it, I said. Chelsea spent the next 10 minutes setting up her phone, hiding it in the flower arrangement on the windowsill, testing the audio quality. Then she called Patricia on her own phone, explained the situation in quick, urgent sentences. I heard Patricia's voice through the speaker, high-pitched with fury and fear. I'm coming right now, Patricia said. And I'm calling Donald on the way. Marianne, honey, are you okay? Are you safe? For now, I said. But Pat, we can't let Garrett know we're on to him. Not until we have everything in place. The hell with that. I'm calling the police. And telling them what? I kept my voice calm, even though I wanted to scream. That my nephew, who has legal power of attorney, had a private phone conversation about selling my house. That I, a woman on heavy pain medication who just had surgery, think I heard him threaten me? Patricia, they won't do anything. Not without proof. Silence on the other end. Then, I hate that you're right. Donald can file emergency motions to revoke the power of attorney, right? How fast can that happen? I'll find out. I'm pulling into his office parking lot now. I heard a car door slam. Marianne, you stay on the phone with Chelsea until I get there. Don't be alone. Not for 1 second. I won't. I promise. Patricia hung up and Chelsea pocketed her phone. I'm staying, she said firmly. My shift doesn't end for 3 hours, and even if it did, I'm staying. You're not going to be alone with him. I wanted to argue, to tell her she didn't need to risk her job for me. But the truth was, I was terrified. Garrett had just casually discussed murdering me like he was ordering pizza. And he thought I was unconscious, vulnerable, completely at his mercy. He had no idea I'd been awake for every word. Thank you, I said quietly. Chelsea squeezed my hand. I've been a nurse for 4 years. I've seen patients abused, neglected, exploited. Usually by the time we figure it out, it's too late. Not this time.
Her jaw set.
Not on my watch. We sat in tense silence for a while. Chelsea checked my vitals, adjusted my pain medication, helped me shift positions to ease the pressure on my hip. Every sound in the hallway made us both jump. Was it Garrett coming back? Was it the doctor? Was it someone who could help or someone who would make things worse? Finally, my phone rang. Chelsea checked the screen. It's Donald Reardon. She put him on speaker. Marianne, it's Donald. Patricia just briefed me, and I need you to listen carefully. His voice was sharp, focused. We're filing emergency motions first thing tomorrow morning, restraining order against Garrett, temporary freeze on all your financial accounts, immediate revocation of power of attorney. But these things take time. We're talking days, maybe a week, before everything goes through. He's selling my house Thursday, I said. I don't have a week. I know. I've already contacted the realtor, told them there's a legal dispute and any sale would be contested. That should slow things down. And I'm filing for an emergency injunction to stop the sale entirely. But Marianne, you need to understand, Garrett can fight this.
He has those signed documents.
He'll argue you're incompetent, that you're confused from medication, that you're being manipulated by friends who want your money. But I'm not incompetent. I'm completely lucid. I know that. But proving it in court while you're recovering from surgery and on pain medication? That's going to be complicated.
He paused.
We need evidence. Hard evidence that Garrett is exploiting you, that he coerced you into signing those documents, that his intentions are malicious. We're working on it, Chelsea interjected. We're recording his next visit. Good. But be careful. If he figures out what you're doing, he could disappear with whatever he's already taken. Or worse. Donald's tone turned grim. Marianne, I'm going to be blunt. You're in danger. Real danger. If Garrett thinks you're going to expose him, you need protection. I'm in a hospital. There are nurses, security. And he has power of attorney, which means he can make medical decisions. He could tell the doctors to increase your pain medication, to reduce monitoring, to do any number of things that could put you at risk. Legally, right now, he's your legal medical guardian. The words hit me like a punch. I hadn't thought of that. Garrett didn't just have access to my money. He had control over my medical care. If he wanted to kill me, he could probably do it without anyone questioning him. So, what do? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Patricia's on her way to the hospital now with temporary guardianship papers. If you sign them, she becomes your power of attorney instead of Garrett. But it's only temporary, good for 48 hours until we can get an emergency court hearing.
And Marianne?
Once you sign those papers, Garrett will know you're onto him. There's no going back. I looked at Chelsea, who nodded encouragement. Then I thought about Garrett's voice on the phone. Hospitals are dangerous places. Medication errors happen. Send the papers, I said. I'll sign them as soon as Patricia gets here.
Good.
I'll also contact hospital administration, let them know there's a legal dispute and that Garrett should not be allowed to make any medical decisions. It won't hold forever, but it'll buy us time. He hesitated. Marianne, one more thing. When Garrett finds out about this, he's going to be angry, possibly violent. Make sure you're never alone with him. Do you understand? I understand. After Donald hung up, Chelsea and I sat in silence for a moment. Then she said, You're doing the right thing. Am I? I stared at the ceiling. He's my sister's son. Linda's baby. I helped raise him after she died. I went to his baseball games, helped him with college applications, gave him money when he needed it. And now I'm protecting yourself from someone who wants you dead. Chelsea's voice was firm. That's not betrayal. That's survival. And Mrs. Caldwell? Your sister would want you to survive. She wouldn't want her son to become a murderer. Murderer. The word hung in the air between us. Because that's what Garrett was planning to become. Not just a thief, not just a con artist. A murderer. My nephew. My family. The boy I'd loved. The monster he'd become. Patricia arrived 45 minutes later, breathless, and carrying a folder of legal documents. She hugged me so hard my hip throbbed, but I didn't care. I needed that hug. Needed that reminder that I wasn't alone in this nightmare. Donald's waiting for a signature, she said, spreading papers across my bed tray. Once you sign, I become your power of attorney. Garrett loses all legal authority over you and your finances. My hand shook as I picked up the pen. This was it. The point of no return. Once I signed, Garrett would know I'd figured out his plan. He'd know I was fighting back. And I had no idea what he'd do when he found out. But I thought about his voice on that phone call. I thought about him telling Blake that hospitals were dangerous places. I thought about him standing in my recovery room, telling the doctor to let me die. I signed my name. Patricia witnessed it, Chelsea witnessed it, and just like that, Garrett's power was gone. Donald's filing these with the court right now, Patricia said, pulling out her phone to take pictures of the signed documents. By morning, Garrett will be officially notified. But Marianne, until then, you're vulnerable. He doesn't know yet that he's lost control. So what do? We wait. We document. And we make sure he never gets you alone. She settled into the chair beside my bed. I'm not leaving. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not until this is over. Patricia, you don't have to. Yes, I do. You're my best friend. You're my sister in every way that matters. And I'll be damned if I let that little weasel hurt you. Her eyes were fierce. Now try to rest. Chelsea's going to stay too, right? My shift ends in an hour, but I'm calling in sick tomorrow and staying here as an off-duty visitor, Chelsea confirmed. Security knows the situation. If Garrett shows up, they'll alert us immediately. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell them they were risking too much, sacrificing too much for me. But the truth was I needed them. I was terrified. And having them here, having allies who believed me and protected me, was the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. Thank you, I whispered. Both of you. Patricia squeezed my hand. That's what family does. Real family. We spent the evening in quiet vigilance. Chelsea brought Patricia coffee and snacks from the cafeteria. I dozed off and on, never quite sleeping, always listening for footsteps in the hallway, for Garrett's voice, for any sign that he was coming back. He didn't come that night. But around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text message. Hey, Aunt Marianne, just checking in. Hope you're resting. I'll come by tomorrow morning around 9. Need to talk to you about some important decisions. Love you. Patricia read the message over my shoulder. Important decisions. He's going to push the nursing home again. Or try to get me to sign something else, I said. More papers, more documents, giving him more control. Well, he's in for a surprise. Patricia's smile was cold. Because by 9 a.m. tomorrow, he's going to know he has zero control. And we're going to be here to see his face when he finds out. I should have felt victorious, empowered, ready to face him. Instead, I felt afraid. Because I knew Garrett. I'd known him since he was 15 years old. And the Garrett I'd known would never have planned to murder me for money. Which meant somewhere along the way, he'd become someone else entirely.
Someone I didn't know.
Someone unpredictable. And unpredictable people were the most dangerous kind. Morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. I'd barely slept, hovering in that awful space between consciousness and dreams where every sound became a threat. Patricia had dozed in the chair beside me, jerking awake every hour to check that I was okay. Chelsea had gone home around midnight, but texted every 2 hours to make sure we were safe. At 7 a.m., Donald called. Papers are filed, he said without preamble. The court clerk opens at 8. By 8:30, Garrett will receive official notification that his power of attorney has been revoked and that he's barred from making any medical or financial decisions on your behalf. Before he gets here at 9, I said.
Exactly.
Marianne, I want you to be prepared. He's going to be angry. Very angry. Don't engage with him. Don't argue. Don't try to explain. Hospital security will be on standby to remove him, if necessary. What if he tries to?
He won't get the chance.
Patricia's there, correct? I'm here. Patricia called out from her chair.
Good. Keep your phone in your hand.
Any sign of trouble, you call 911 first, and me second. Understood. We both agreed, and Donald hung up to finalize the court filings. Patricia stood up, stretched, winced at the stiffness in her back. I need coffee. Want anything? Just water. My mouth was dry, my stomach twisted in knots. In 2 hours, Garrett would walk through that door expecting a weak, confused old woman he could manipulate. Instead, he'd find out he'd lost everything. And I had no idea how he'd react. Patricia left for the cafeteria, and I was alone for the first time in 12 hours. The morning sun slanted through the window, making the flower arrangement glow, the same flower arrangement hiding Chelsea's phone, still recording, still waiting to capture Garrett's confession. Would he say something incriminating today? Or would he be too careful? Too controlled? My own phone buzzed. Another text from Garrett. On my way. Traffic's light. Should be there by 8:45.
Can't wait to see you.
Can't wait to manipulate me, more like. Can't wait to push those nursing home papers again, to isolate me further, to tighten his control. Except he didn't have control anymore. And he was about to find out. Patricia returned with coffee and a breakfast sandwich. She insisted I try to eat. You need your strength, she said. Today's going to be intense. I managed a few bites, though everything tasted like cardboard. My hip throbbed despite the pain medication. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. At 8:15, Chelsea arrived, off duty, but dressed in scrubs anyway. Figured I'd blend in better, she explained. Security knows I'm here. I briefed the charge nurse on the situation. If anything happens, we've got backup. At 8:32, Donald called again. He's been served. Court clerk confirmed Garrett Caldwell received electronic notification 4 minutes ago. My heart started racing. So he knows. He knows. Which means the door slammed open. Garrett stood in the doorway, his face red, his jaw clenched, a paper crumpled in his fist. He looked nothing like the concerned nephew who'd visited yesterday. This was someone else entirely, someone furious and desperate and dangerous. What the hell is this? He strode toward my bed, waving the paper. What the hell did you do? Patricia stepped between us. Back up, Garrett. Get out of my way. His voice was low, threatening. This is between me and my aunt. Nothing is between you and your aunt anymore, Patricia said calmly. You've been removed as power of attorney. You have no legal authority here. She's on medication. She doesn't know what she's doing. You convinced her to. I convinced myself, I said, and my voice came out stronger than I expected. When I heard you tell that doctor to let me die. When I heard you on the phone with Blake, talking about selling my house and discussing whether you'd need to kill me if I became a problem. The color drained from his face. You were unconscious. You couldn't have. Anesthesia awareness, Chelsea said from her position by the door. It happens. And everything your aunt heard is documented in her medical records now, along with your conversation about DNR orders. Garrett's expression cycled through shock, panic, and then hardened into something cold and calculating. You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine, and you're a sick old woman on pain medication. Actually, Chelsea held up her phone, the one still hidden in the flowers. We have you on recording. Your visit yesterday? Everything you said to your aunt while you thought she was asleep? We have it. It was a bluff. Chelsea's phone was still in the flowers, and we didn't actually have yesterday's recording. But Garrett didn't know that. His hands clenched into fists. You recorded me without consent? That's illegal. In a hospital room? When you were making threats against a patient? Chelsea smiled coldly. Try again. This is insane. Garrett turned back to me, and I saw something frightening in his eyes. A trapped animal, cornered and desperate. Aunt Marian, please. You don't understand. I was trying to help you. The house is too much for you to manage. The money, you need someone to handle it. I was protecting you. By telling your girlfriend that hospitals are dangerous places? By discussing medication errors and infections as convenient ways for me to die. I kept my voice level, refused to let him see how terrified I was. That's not protection, Garrett. That's murder. I never. You misheard. The recording has timestamps, Patricia interjected. And we've already provided copies to Marianne's lawyer and to the police. That was also a bluff, but Garrett didn't need to know that either. His face twisted. The police? You called the police? Elder abuse is a crime, Chelsea said. Financial exploitation is a crime. And conspiracy to commit murder? That's a serious crime. I didn't. Garrett took a step back, then another. His eyes darted between the three of us, calculating. You can't do this. I have rights. I'm family. You were family, I said quietly, until you decided I was worth more dead than alive. Something broke in his expression then. The mask cracked, and underneath I saw raw fury and fear. You ungrateful. Do you know what I've sacrificed for you? The time, the visits, playing the good nephew? I hated every minute of it. Listening to your boring stories about teaching, pretending to care about your stupid house, acting like I gave a damn about your dead husband. There it was. The truth, finally. Ugly and honest, and exactly what I'd suspected. I needed that money, he continued, his voice rising. I'm drowning in debt. Credit cards, loans, gambling. I'm 50,000 in the hole and Blake's pregnant and I don't have any other options. You're old, you're alone. You were going to die soon anyway. I just needed to speed things up a little. Patricia gasped. Chelsea's hand went to her phone. And I just stared at this stranger who'd once been my nephew, who'd once been Linda's little boy. You thought I was going to die soon anyway, I repeated. So, it would be okay to kill me. I wasn't going to. He stopped himself, realizing what he'd just admitted. You can't use that. You tricked me. We didn't trick you, Patricia said. We just let you talk. And you confessed to attempted murder. The door opened, and 2 hospital security guards entered, followed by 2 police officers in uniform. Garrett Caldwell? One of the officers said. Garrett's face went gray.
No.
No, this is a misunderstanding. We need you to come with us, sir. We have some questions about financial irregularities involving Mrs. Mary Ann Caldwell's accounts. I'm her power of attorney. I'm allowed to. Not anymore, you're not, the officer said firmly. Ma'am?
He looked at me.
Are you Mary Ann Caldwell? I am. We're going to need a statement from you about your nephew's activities regarding your finances and medical care. Are you feeling well enough to talk to us? I nodded. I'll tell you everything. Garrett made a move toward my bed, and both security guards stepped forward. Don't, one of them warned. Aunt Marian, please. Garrett's voice cracked. Please, you don't understand. I'll pay it back. All of it. I'll get a job, You threatened to kill me, I said, and my voice didn't shake. You stood in this room yesterday and discussed murdering me like it was a business decision. There's no coming back from that, Garrett. She's lying. He looked at the officers desperately. She's confused. She's on medication. She doesn't know what she's saying. The medical staff confirms she's completely lucid, one of the officers said. And we've already frozen your accounts pending investigation. Sir, you need to come with us.
Now.
They escorted Garrett out, his protests echoing down the hallway. I watched him go. This person who'd once been family, who'd once been someone I loved and trusted, who'd become something unrecognizable. The door closed, and silence fell over the room. Then Patricia started crying. Not sad tears. Angry, relieved tears. She grabbed my hand and held it tight. It's over. Mary Ann, it's over. Not quite, Chelsea said gently. The police will need statements. Donald will need to work through the legal proceedings. And Garrett might make bail. Then we make sure the case is airtight, I said. My whole body felt like it was vibrating, adrenaline and fear and rage all mixed together. We document everything. Every threat, every manipulation, every dollar he took. We make sure he never has the chance to do this to anyone else. Are you enjoying this story so far? If you're as invested as I am in seeing Garrett get what he deserves, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And hey, if you haven't already, drop a comment telling me what you think happens next. Believe me, this story is just getting started. The rest of that day was a blur of police interviews, legal consultations, and medical checks. Donald arrived in person bringing more papers to sign, more protections to put in place. The police found evidence of Garrett transferring $42,000 from my accounts over the past 2 months, small amounts at first, then larger sums as he got bolder. They found texts between him and Blake about the windfall coming their way. They found the listing he'd submitted for my house, scheduled to go live on Thursday. They found everything. This is a strong case, the lead detective told me. Financial exploitation of an elderly person, attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit murder based on his recorded statements. We're looking at serious prison time if convicted. What about bail? Patricia asked. He'll probably make bail on the financial charges. But with the murder conspiracy allegations, the DA might argue he's a flight risk or a danger. The detective closed his notebook. Mrs. Caldwell, I want to be straight with you. This is going to be a long process. Months, maybe a year before trial. And Garrett's lawyer is going to argue that you misheard, that you misunderstood, that the medications affected your perception. I know what I heard, I said firmly. I believe you. And we'll make sure the jury believes you too. After the police left, after Donald left, after the nurses finished their rounds, it was finally just me and Patricia again. Chelsea had gone home to sleep, promising to return tomorrow. You okay? Patricia asked, studying my face. Was I okay? My nephew had tried to have me killed. He'd stolen my money, planned to steal my house, and casually discussed turning me into a corpse. My sister's son, the boy I'd helped raise, had become a monster.
No, I said honestly. I'm not okay. But I will be. That's my girl. Patricia squeezed my hand. And Marianne? What you did today, standing up to him, fighting back, Linda would be so proud. Linda. I thought about my sister, gone for 17 years now, killed by a rainstorm and a slick road. What would she think of what her son had become? Would she blame me for not seeing the signs earlier, for not protecting him from himself? Or would she understand that some people choose darkness, regardless of how much light you try to give them? I hope so, I whispered. That night, I finally slept. Really slept, for the first time since the surgery. And I didn't dream of Garrett's voice in the recovery room or his hand on my arm or his threats whispered in the darkness. I dreamed of Thomas, my late husband, sitting on our front porch in the evening sun. He smiled at me the way he used to, and he said, "You're stronger than you think, Marianne. You always have been." When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the window, and Patricia was asleep in the chair beside me, her hand still holding mine even in sleep. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than fear. I felt powerful. Garrett had thought I was an easy target. Old, alone, vulnerable. He'd thought I'd go quietly, that I'd let him steal everything Thomas and I had built, that I'd die without a fight. He'd been so very wrong. And now, lying in that hospital bed with my best friend beside me and justice finally within reach, I made myself a promise. I would survive this. I would heal. I would rebuild. And I would make damn sure that Garrett Caldwell paid for every threat, every lie, every dollar he'd stolen. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But for the first time, I believed I was going to win. 3 days after Garrett's arrest, I was finally discharged from the hospital. My hip was healing, physical therapy was progressing, and I could walk short distances with a walker. But the real healing, the emotional kind, was just beginning. Because while I was recovering in that hospital bed, Donald and Patricia had been digging. And what they found made Garrett's betrayal look even worse than I'd imagined. Donald came to my hospital room on discharge day with a thick folder and an expression that told me I wasn't going to like what I heard. "We've been investigating Garrett's financial activities," he said, sitting down heavily in the visitor's chair. "Marianne, it's worse than we thought." Patricia, who was packing my things, stopped mid-fold. "How much worse?" "He didn't just take $42,000. That's what we found in the obvious transfers." Donald opened the folder, spread out bank statements and credit card bills. "But he also opened 3 credit cards in your name using the power of attorney. Maxed them out. That's another $38,000 in debt." My stomach dropped. $80,000? That's not all. Donald pulled out more papers. "He took out a home equity line of credit against your house. Forged your signature on the application, or rather, he signed as your power of attorney, which technically gave him the right to do so. That's another $120,000. The room spun. $200,000? And he contacted your pension administrator, tried to change the beneficiary designation. They denied it because it required your signature in person, not just power of attorney authorization. But Marianne, he was going after everything." Patricia sat down hard on the edge of my bed. "That little bastard. That absolute. There's more." Donald looked at me, and I saw pity in his eyes. "We found messages between Garrett and Blake going back 8 months. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. He planned this, researched elder exploitation laws, figured out exactly how to isolate you and drain your accounts before anyone noticed. 8 months. While he'd been bringing me coffee and acting concerned, he'd been planning to rob me blind. He studied you," Donald continued. "Learned your routines, your friendships, your vulnerabilities. He knew Patricia was your closest friend, so he started suggesting she was too busy with her grandkids to help you. He knew you were grieving Thomas, so he positioned himself as family support. Every visit, every conversation, it was all calculated. I felt sick. Show me the messages. Donald hesitated. Marianne, I don't think. Show me. He pulled out printed screenshots. Text conversations between Garrett and Blake, marked with dates and timestamps. I read them in chronological order, watching my nephew transform from someone plotting theft into someone plotting murder. March 15th, she's so trusting it's almost sad. Asked me to help with her estate planning. Like handing me the keys to the vault. April 3rd, got her to sign POA papers today. She didn't even read them, just trusted me. This is going to be easier than I thought. June 12th, transferred another $5,000. She hasn't noticed. Old people never check their accounts properly. July 28th, Blake's pregnant. We need the money now, not in 5 years when she dies naturally. Need to speed this up. September 2nd, hip surgery scheduled for next month. Perfect opportunity. If complications happen during surgery, I'm her POA. I can make decisions. And hospitals? People die in hospitals all the time. September 19th, been researching DNR orders and medical power of attorney. If her heart stops during surgery, I can tell them not to revive. Natural causes. No questions asked. My hands shook holding the papers. This wasn't impulse or desperation. This was premeditation. Cold, calculated planning to end my life. There's also evidence he was drugging your coffee during visits, Donald said quietly. We found a bottle of prescription sleep medication in his apartment. Same kind that causes confusion and memory problems in elderly patients. The police theory is he was making you seem confused to justify the nursing home placement and to make you seem incompetent if you ever tried to fight back. Patricia made a sound like a wounded animal. He was poisoning her? Small doses, probably. Enough to make her seem forgetful, not enough to require medical intervention. Donald closed the folder. Garrett wasn't just stealing from you, Marianne. He was systematically destroying your credibility so no one would believe you if you figured out what he was doing. I thought about those last few months, the moments where I'd felt foggy, confused, unable to remember simple things. I'd blamed it on age, on grief, on being alone too much. But it had been Garrett. Poisoning my coffee while he smiled and asked about my day. The DA is adding charges, Donald continued. Forgery, identity theft, elder abuse, poisoning with intent to harm, and conspiracy to commit murder. With the evidence we have, we're looking at 15 to 20 years if he's convicted on all counts. 20 years. Garrett was 32. He'd be in his 50s when he got out, if he got out. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no victory. Just emptiness where love for my nephew used to be.
What about the money? Patricia asked. Can we get it back? Some of it. The direct transfers from her accounts, yes. The credit card debt is trickier. We'll need to prove fraud, which means filing disputes with each company. The home equity line is the biggest problem. That money's already spent, and the lien is on Marianne's house. We'll argue that the POA documents were obtained through manipulation and that Garrett exceeded his authority, but it's going to be a fight. So even if we won, even if Garrett went to prison, I'd still be in debt. My house, the home Thomas and I had built together, would have a lien against it. My credit would be destroyed. My savings depleted. Garrett had tried to kill me, and even though he'd failed, he'd still managed to ruin my life. I see that look on your face, Patricia said firmly. Don't you dare give up now. We'll fight the lien, we'll fight the debt, and we'll rebuild. You're alive, Marianne. That's what matters. She was right. I was alive. And as long as I was alive, I could fight back. But God, I was tired. Tired of fighting, tired of being afraid, tired of the betrayal that kept cutting deeper every time we uncovered new evidence. There's one more thing, Donald said, and his tone made me look up. We found other victims. What? Garrett did this before. To his paternal grandmother, Helen Caldwell, 6 years ago. She died before anyone realized what he'd done. Natural causes, heart attack, but going through old family records, we found similar patterns. Sudden power of attorney, withdrawn funds, isolated from other family members. Helen's estate was supposed to be split between Garrett's father and his sister. Instead, Garrett got everything. My blood ran cold. He killed his grandmother? We can't prove it. She died of natural causes according to the death certificate. But the timing, the pattern, it's suspicious. And there's another case, an elderly neighbor of his from 3 years ago. Same thing. He befriended her, got power of attorney, started draining her accounts. She died in her sleep. Natural causes, and Garrett inherited $50,000. How is he not in prison already? Patricia demanded. Because no one investigated. No one questioned. He was the helpful young man taking care of confused elderly people. And when they died, everyone assumed natural causes and grief. Donald's voice was bitter. Garrett's been getting away with this for years, perfecting his technique. You were just his biggest target yet. 3 people. Possibly 3 murders. Definitely 3 thefts. And I'd almost been the 4th. We're giving all this information to the DA, Donald said. They're reopening the investigations into Helen Caldwell's and the neighbors' deaths. If they find evidence of foul play, Garrett could be looking at multiple murder charges. Multiple murders. My nephew, the serial killer. How had I not seen it? How had none of us seen it? You couldn't have known, Patricia said, reading my expression. Sociopaths are good at hiding what they are. That's what makes them dangerous. Linda would be devastated, I whispered. My sister, who'd loved her son so much, who died thinking he was a good kid with a bright future. She'd be heartbroken. Linda would want you safe, Patricia said firmly. And she'd want Garrett held accountable. Don't carry guilt for his choices. Easy to say. Harder to believe. Donald left to file more motions and meet with the DA. Patricia drove me home. To my house, the one Garrett had tried to sell, the one that now had a lien against it thanks to his fraud. We pulled into the driveway, and I stared at the front porch, the Japanese maple in the yard, the home I'd lived in for 37 years. It didn't feel safe anymore. It felt tainted, violated. Garrett had been here dozens of times, walking through these rooms with fake concern while plotting how to take it all away from me. Come on, Patricia said gently. Let's get you inside and settled. She helped me up the porch steps, through the front door into my living room. Everything looked the same furniture, same photos on the walls, same afternoon light slanting through the windows. But it all felt different.
Wrong.
Like I was visiting a museum of my old life instead of living in my home. Patricia made tea while I sat on the couch, my walker beside me, staring at the family photos on the mantel. Thomas and me on our wedding day. Linda and me as teenagers. Garrett at his high school graduation, smiling at the camera, looking so normal, so harmless. I took that photo down and put it face down in a drawer. Smart, Patricia said, bringing in the tea. Out of sight, out of mind. I don't think I'll ever get him out of my mind.
No.
But the memories will get smaller. The fear will fade. Trust me. She sat down beside me. When my ex-husband embezzled from our business and tried to frame me for it, I thought I'd never trust anyone again. But I did. It took time, but I did. This is different. Tom was your husband, but at least he wasn't blood family. Doesn't matter. Betrayal is betrayal, and it cuts the same either way. She squeezed my hand. You're going to survive this, Marianne. Not just survive, thrive. You're going to take everything Garrett tried to destroy and rebuild it stronger. I wanted to believe her, but sitting in my living room, hip throbbing, heartbroken, future uncertain, I couldn't see how. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Caldwell? This is Detective Martinez. I'm calling about Garrett Caldwell's bail hearing. My heart stopped. What about it? He made bail 2 hours ago. $50,000 posted by his girlfriend's parents.
He's out.
The room tilted. He's out? He threatened to kill me, and he's out. He's wearing an ankle monitor and has a restraining order keeping him at least 500 feet from you and your property. But yes, he's out pending trial. The detective's voice was apologetic. I wanted to warn you. He's not supposed to contact you in any way, but if he does, call 911 immediately. He's going to run, Patricia said after I hung up. He knows the evidence against him. He's going to take Blake and disappear. Maybe that's better, I said quietly. Maybe I never have to see him again, never have to testify, never have to relive this nightmare in a courtroom.
No.
Patricia's voice was steel. He doesn't get to run away and do this to someone else. He needs to face consequences, real consequences. And you need closure. Closure. Such a simple word for such a complicated thing. That night, Patricia stayed over, sleeping in my guest room. I lay awake in my own bed, the bed Thomas and I had shared for 40 years, and listened to every sound. Every car passing outside, every creak of the house settling, every rustle of wind against the windows. Was Garrett out there? Was he planning something? The restraining order was just paper. If he decided to come after me, what would really stop him? I finally fell asleep around 3 a.m., exhausted and terrified. And when I woke up the next morning, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just wait for the trial, couldn't just hope the justice system worked, couldn't just trust that Garrett would stay away. I needed to take control, not through violence or revenge, but through something more powerful. I needed to make sure this never happened to anyone else. The idea came to me during physical therapy on Thursday morning. My therapist, a woman named Rosa, who'd worked with elderly patients for 20 years, was helping me practice walking without the walker when she said something that stuck with me. You're doing great, Mrs. Caldwell. Most patients your age are too scared to push themselves after what you've been through.
But you?
You're a fighter. A fighter. That's what I'd been my whole life. Fighting for my students, fighting for my school, fighting to build a life with Thomas, fighting through grief when he died. And now I was fighting for my survival, my dignity, my future. But fighting alone wasn't enough. I needed strategy. When I got home, Patricia was at my kitchen table with her laptop, working through the credit card dispute forms Donald had sent over. She looked up when I came in. Good session? Patricia, I need your help with something. I sat down across from her, ignoring my protesting hip. I want to teach other people how to protect themselves. Free classes at the senior center or the library. Financial literacy for elderly people, how to recognize exploitation, how to protect your assets, what to watch for in family members or caregivers. Patricia's eyes widened. That's brilliant. I spent 40 years teaching. It's what I know how to do. And if I can stop even one person from going through what I went through, then Garrett's betrayal becomes something meaningful. Patricia was already typing on her laptop. I'll reach out to the senior center, see about booking space. And Marianne? I think we should make this bigger. Not just classes, a foundation. Elder abuse prevention, legal resources, support groups for victims. It was too big, too ambitious, too much for someone still recovering from surgery and betrayal. But it was also exactly right. Thomas's life insurance, I said slowly. There's still $100,000 I haven't touched because I couldn't bear to spend it. What if we used it to start a foundation? The Thomas and Marianne Caldwell Foundation for Elder Protection. Patricia smiled, and it was the first real smile I'd seen from her in days. He would love that. Turning something evil into something good. We spent the rest of the day planning. Patricia contacted the senior center, the public library, and 3 local community centers. I wrote up a curriculum based on my own experience. Warning signs of financial exploitation, how to choose trustworthy people for power of attorney, questions to ask lawyers about estate planning, red flags in caregiver behavior. By the end of the week, we had our first class scheduled. 30 seniors signed up within 2 days. People need this, Patricia said, showing me the registration numbers. There are so many elderly people out there being exploited right now, and they don't even know it. The night before my first class, I was terrified. What if I broke down in front of 30 strangers? What if talking about Garrett's betrayal was too raw, too painful? What if I couldn't help anyone? But when I walked into that community center meeting room on Monday morning, still using my walker, still healing, and saw 30 faces looking at me with hope and fear and desperation, I knew I had to do this. My name is Marion Caldwell. I began, and 6 weeks ago, my nephew tried to have me killed so he could inherit my money. I'm here to make sure that never happens to you. The room was silent. Then a woman in the front row started crying, and she said, "My son-in-law has been asking me to sign power of attorney papers. I've been so scared, but I didn't know who to talk to." And just like that, they opened up. Stories of financial pressure from family members, of adult children who'd suddenly become interested in their parents' assets, of confusion about legal documents and fear of being alone and vulnerable. I taught them everything Donald had taught me. How to set up safeguards on financial accounts. How to choose a trustworthy power of attorney or use a professional fiduciary instead of family. How to recognize manipulation tactics. What elder abuse actually looked like, because it wasn't always dramatic threats. Sometimes it was subtle isolation and gentle pressure and fake concern. My nephew brought me coffee every week, I told them. He helped with my paperwork. He acted like he cared. And the whole time, he was drugging my coffee and planning my death. The people who hurt us aren't strangers in dark alleys. They're the ones we trust most. After class, 12 people stayed to talk to me privately. One woman showed me bank statements with suspicious withdrawals. An elderly man confessed his daughter had power of attorney and had sold his car without permission. A widow told me her stepson was pressuring her to move into a nursing home so he could sell her house. I gave them Donald's number. I connected them with resources. I listened to their stories and validated their fears and told them the same thing Patricia had told me. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Over the next 2 weeks, I taught 4 more classes. Each one was full. Each one had stories that broke my heart. And each one made me more determined to turn my trauma into something meaningful. Patricia and I officially filed paperwork for the Caldwell Foundation, using Thomas's insurance money as seed funding. Donald helped us set up the legal structure. Chelsea volunteered to help with outreach to medical professionals, teaching them how to spot signs of elder abuse in their patients. And through it all, I kept healing. Physical therapy strengthened my hip. Teaching strengthened my spirit. And slowly, day by day, I started to feel less like a victim and more like myself again. Then, 3 weeks after my first class, my doorbell rang at 8 p.m. Patricia had gone home for the night. I was alone in my house, reading on the couch. The doorbell rang again, insistent. I looked through the peephole and felt my blood turn to ice. Garrett stood on my front porch. He shouldn't be here. The restraining order said 500 feet. My house was off limits. But there he was, looking thinner, desperate, his eyes wild. I didn't open the door. Instead, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. "There's someone at my door in violation of a restraining order," I told the dispatcher, keeping my voice steady. "Garrett Caldwell. He's supposed to stay away from me. Police are on their way, ma'am. Stay inside. Do not engage with him." But Garrett started talking through the door. "Aunt Marion, please. I know you're in there. I just need to talk to you. 5 minutes. Please." I said nothing. "They're going to send me to prison for 20 years. His voice cracked. 20 years for trying to help you. For trying to take care of family business. You know I didn't mean any of it. You know I love you." Still, I said nothing. Just clutched my phone and prayed the police would arrive before he decided to break down the door. "Blake left me," he continued, and now he was crying. "She took the baby, my baby, and moved back to her parents. I lost my apartment. I have nothing. And it's all because you turned everyone against me."
I turned everyone against him. As if his actions had nothing to do with it. "I need money," Garrett said. "Just enough to start over somewhere else. $10,000. You have it, I know you do. Just give me 10,000 and I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." There it was. The real reason he was here. Not to apologize, not to explain. To steal more money. "I'm not leaving until you talk to me," he said, his voice turning hard. "I'll stand here all night if I have to." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Garrett must have heard them too, because he started pounding on the door. "You owe me," he shouted. "After everything my mother did for you, after I took care of you, you owe me. Open this door." The sirens stopped outside my house. Red and blue lights flashed through my windows. Car doors slammed. "Garrett Caldwell, step away from the door," an officer's voice commanded. "You're in violation of a restraining order." "She's my aunt. I have a right to." "You have the right to remain silent," the officer said, and I heard the click of handcuffs. "Anything you say can and will be used against you." I listened to them read Garrett his rights, listened to him protest and curse and finally fall silent. Listened to them load him into the patrol car and drive away. Only then did I open my door. 2 officers remained, taking my statement. Yes, Garrett had shown up uninvited. No, I hadn't let him in. Yes, I felt threatened. Yes, I wanted to press charges for restraining order violation. "This will strengthen the DA's case," one officer told me. "Shows he's a continued threat, that he can't follow court orders. His bail will likely be revoked." Good. Let him sit in jail until trial. Let him think about what he'd done, what he'd lost, what he'd become. After the police left, I called Patricia. She wanted to come over immediately, but I told her I was fine. And surprisingly, I was. Seeing Garrett desperate and pathetic on my doorstep hadn't scared me as much as I'd thought it would. It had just made me sad. He'd destroyed himself. Not me, not Patricia, not the justice system. Garrett had made every choice that led him to handcuffs on my front porch. And now he'd have to live with those choices. I went to bed that night knowing that tomorrow, I'd teach another class. Tomorrow, I'd help more people protect themselves. Tomorrow, I'd continue building something good from the ashes of betrayal. And Garrett? Garrett would sit in a cell and think about what he could have been if he'd chosen love instead of greed. The trial date was set for February, 4 months after Garrett's arrest. 4 months of waiting, preparing, reliving every moment of the betrayal through depositions and witness statements and evidence review. 4 months of Patricia and Donald and Chelsea holding me together while I fell apart and rebuilt myself over and over. But those 4 months weren't wasted. The Caldwell Foundation grew beyond anything I'd imagined. We taught 26 classes reaching over 400 seniors. We helped 38 people report financial abuse to authorities. We connected 65 elderly victims with legal resources and support groups. And we stopped 3 potential murders. 3 elderly people whose adult children were actively planning to exploit them, possibly kill them, for inheritance money. Because of our classes, because of the warning signs we taught, those 3 people recognized the danger and got help before it was too late. 3 lives saved because I'd survived and decided to fight back. But the trial itself, that was the hardest thing I'd ever done. They held it downtown in the Superior Court building, a massive gray structure that felt cold and impersonal. Donald prepared me for weeks. What the DA would ask, what Garrett's defense attorney would argue, how to stay calm under cross-examination. "They're going to try to make you seem confused," he warned. "They'll point to your age, your medications, your surgery. They'll suggest you misunderstood Garrett's intentions, that you were paranoid or being manipulated by Patricia." "Let them try," I said. "I know what I heard. I know what he did." The courtroom was packed on opening day. Patricia sat directly behind me in the gallery. Chelsea had taken time off work to be there. Even Rosa, my physical therapist, showed up to support me. And there was Garrett, sitting at the defense table in a suit I'd bought him for a job interview 2 years ago. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. His lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Jennifer Walsh, leaned close to whisper to him. He nodded, avoiding my eyes. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Bank records showing $82,000 in stolen funds. Credit cards opened fraudulently. The home equity line of credit. Text messages between Garrett and Blake discussing the inheritance windfall. Medical records documenting anesthesia awareness. Witness statements from Chelsea and other hospital staff about the DNR conversation. They played recordings of Garrett on the phone with Blake, talking about how old people are so trusting, and how hospitals are dangerous places. His voice filled the courtroom, casual and cold, discussing my death like a business transaction. I watched the jury's faces, saw their expressions shift from neutral to shocked to disgusted. Then it was my turn to testify. The DA, a man named Robert Chin, was gentle with his questions. He walked me through everything. How Garrett had isolated me, manipulated me, drugged my coffee, gotten me to sign power of attorney documents. How I'd woken during surgery recovery and heard him tell the doctor not to resuscitate me. How he'd discussed killing me if I became a problem. Mrs. Caldwell, Chin said, did you ever give your nephew permission to take money from your accounts? No. Did you ever discuss wanting to die or asking him to let you go if complications arose during surgery? Never. I wanted to live. I want to live. Thank you. No further questions. Then Jennifer Walsh stood up for cross-examination, and I understood what Donald had warned me about. Mrs. Caldwell, you were on significant pain medication after your surgery, correct? Yes. And you'd just undergone general anesthesia? Yes. And you're 67 years old, recently widowed, living alone. Would you say you were in a vulnerable emotional state? Donald objected. The judge sustained it. But Walsh had planted the seed. You testified that you heard my client on the phone with his girlfriend. But you were supposedly unconscious during this conversation, correct? I had anesthesia awareness. I was conscious but paralyzed. How convenient. Walsh's smile was sharp. And you have proof of this awareness? It's documented in my medical records. By nurses who were informed of your allegations after the fact. But at the time, when you were supposedly conscious and listening, did anyone know you were aware? Not until I could move my finger. So no one can actually verify that you heard what you claim to have heard. We only have your word, the word of a woman on pain medication who just had surgery. Walsh turned to the jury. Mrs. Caldwell, isn't it true that you and my client had disagreements about your care? That he was concerned about your ability to live alone, and you resented his suggestions about assisted living?
He wasn't concerned. He was isolating me, so he could. Please answer yes or no. Did you have disagreements about your living situation? Yes, but... Thank you. And isn't it true that your friend Patricia Holbrook had encouraged you to change your will, to leave less to my client? That was a lie. But before I could respond, Donald objected, and the judge called Walsh to sidebar for a heated discussion about inappropriate questions. It went on like that for 2 hours. Walsh twisting everything, suggesting I was confused, paranoid, being manipulated by Patricia and Donald for their own financial gain. She painted Garrett as a concerned nephew trying to help his elderly aunt, who'd been misunderstood and falsely accused because of medication-induced confusion. By the time I stepped down from the witness stand, I was shaking with rage and exhaustion. But the prosecution wasn't done. They called Blake to the stand. She'd made a deal, testimony against Garrett in exchange for immunity. She walked up to that witness stand 8 months pregnant, looking terrified and guilty. Miss Torres, Chin said, can you tell the court about conversations you had with the defendant regarding his aunt? Blake's voice was small, quiet. He said she was rich, that she was old and alone, and that she'd die soon anyway, so why wait? He said he had power of attorney and could make decisions about her care. Did he ever discuss wanting to hurt Mrs. Caldwell? He said. Blake's eyes filled with tears. He said if she figured out what he was doing, he'd make sure she had an accident, like a medication error or an infection. He said it would be easy in a hospital. The jury's shock was visible. One woman actually gasped. And, did you try to stop him? Chun asked. I should have. I know I should have. Blake was crying now. But I was pregnant and we needed money, and he kept saying it wasn't really wrong because she was going to die soon anyway. He made it sound so reasonable. Garrett's lawyer objected, argued Blake's testimony was biased because of her plea deal. But the damage was done. The jury had heard Blake confirm everything I'd said. The prosecution rested. The defense called character witnesses, people who'd known Garrett, who testified he was a good person, a hard worker, someone who'd never hurt anyone. His father, Harold, took the stand and sobbed about how Garrett was his only son, how this was all a misunderstanding. I watched Harold cry and felt something twist in my chest. He'd lost his mother to Garrett's greed 6 years ago, though he didn't know it. And now he was about to lose his son to prison. Garrett himself didn't testify. His lawyer advised against it, probably knowing he'd destroy himself under cross-examination. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Then the jury deliberated for 3 days. I spent those 3 days in agony, alternating between hope and despair. What if they believed Walsh's arguments? What if they thought I was just a confused old woman? What if Garrett walked free? On the 3rd day, my phone rang. Donald's voice was careful, controlled. Jury's back. Verdict in 30 minutes. Patricia drove me to the courthouse. We sat in the gallery, surrounded by people who'd become my support system. Chelsea, Rosa, 3 people from my elder abuse classes who'd wanted to show support. On the other side of the courtroom, Garrett sat with his lawyer, his father beside him holding his hand. The jury filed in. I studied their faces, trying to read the verdict. They wouldn't look at Garrett. That was good, right? Wasn't that good? Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. The court clerk took the paper, handed it to the judge. He read it without expression, then handed it back. On the count of financial elder abuse, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. Harold Caldwell made a sound like he'd been punched. On the count of forgery? Guilty. On the count of identity theft? Guilty. On the count of poisoning with intent to harm? Guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder? A long pause. My heart stopped. Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Garrett dropped his head into his hands. His lawyer was already talking about appeals. Harold was crying openly. And I sat frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard. Guilty. On all counts. Patricia grabbed my hand so hard it hurt. Chelsea was crying behind me. Donald squeezed my shoulder. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later, and Garrett was remanded to custody immediately. As they let him out in handcuffs, he finally looked at me. Our eyes met across the courtroom. I expected him to look angry or defiant or remorseful. Instead, he just looked empty, like something inside him had broken completely. I looked away first. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Donald handled them while Patricia got me to the car. My phone was ringing constantly, friends, family, people from my classes wanting to know the verdict. It's over, Patricia kept saying. Marianne, it's over. You won. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving. There's a difference. Sentencing day came 2 weeks later on a Tuesday morning that felt more like an ending than a beginning. I'd prepared a victim impact statement, something the DA said would help the judge understand the full scope of Garrett's crimes. But as I sat in that courtroom waiting for my turn to speak, I wasn't sure I could do it. Donald had warned me Garrett might speak too, might apologize or try to explain himself one last time. Don't expect sincerity, he'd said. His lawyer will coach him to say whatever might reduce his sentence. The judge called the court to order. Garrett stood with his attorney, thinner than before, wearing the same suit from the trial. His father sat in the gallery, looking 20 years older than he had 2 weeks ago. Mr. Caldwell, the judge said, do you wish to address the court before sentencing? Garrett nodded. His voice, when he spoke, was hoarse. Your Honor, I know I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. I was desperate. My girlfriend was pregnant. I was drowning in debt. I wasn't thinking clearly. But I never actually hurt my aunt. She's fine. She survived, and I'm glad she did. I'm sorry for the pain I caused, and I hope someday she can forgive me. The words were pretty, rehearsed, empty, because I wasn't fine. I'd lost $82,000. My credit was ruined. My house had a lien against it. I'd spent months terrified, looking over my shoulder, unable to sleep. I'd lost my ability to trust family, to feel safe in my own home. Those weren't things that healed with time. Those were permanent scars. Mrs. Caldwell, the judge said, would you like to read your victim impact statement? I stood up, my legs shaking. Patricia gave me an encouraging nod. I walked to the podium and unfolded my statement. Your Honor, my name is Marianne Caldwell. I'm 67 years old. I was a school principal for 43 years. I'm a widow. And 6 months ago, my nephew tried to have me killed so he could inherit my money. My voice was steady, stronger than I'd expected. Garrett Caldwell didn't make a mistake. He made a series of calculated decisions over 8 months. He researched how to exploit elderly people. He studied my vulnerabilities. He drugged my coffee to make me seem confused. He manipulated me into signing power of attorney documents. He stole over $200,000 when you count the credit cards and home equity line. And when I was lying paralyzed in a hospital bed recovering from surgery, he told a doctor to let me die. I looked at Garrett. He was staring at the table. But the worst part wasn't the money, or even the death threats. The worst part was the betrayal. Garrett is my sister's son. Linda died when he was 15, and I tried to be there for him. I helped with college fees, sent birthday money, attended his graduation. I loved him because he was family, and he used that love as a weapon against me. My voice cracked, but I kept going. He made me doubt myself. Made me think I was losing my mind when he poisoned my coffee. Made me feel like a burden when he suggested nursing homes. Made me feel alone when he isolated me from my friends. He didn't just try to steal my money. He tried to steal my dignity, my independence, my sense of self. I paused, took a breath. Your Honor, Garrett told the police he never actually hurt me, that I survived so the harm wasn't that bad. But I didn't just survive. I fought. I had friends who believed me, medical staff who protected me, a lawyer who helped me fight back. Without them, I'd be dead. And Garrett would have gotten away with it. The courtroom was silent. The prosecution discovered that Garrett did this before. To his grandmother Helen 6 years ago. To an elderly neighbor 3 years ago. Both women died under suspicious circumstances, and both times Garrett inherited money. I was supposed to be his third victim. But I survived, so now everyone knows what he is. I looked at the judge directly. Garrett Caldwell is dangerous. Not because he's violent or impulsive, but because he's calculated and patient. He targets vulnerable elderly people, gains their trust, and systematically destroys them. He's a predator. And if you give him a light sentence, if you show mercy he doesn't deserve, he'll do this again the first chance he gets. I folded my statement. I'm asking you to give him the maximum sentence allowed by law. Not for revenge, but for protection. So that other elderly people don't become his victims. So that he can't hurt anyone else the way he hurt me, and Helen, and that neighbor whose name I don't even know. I sat down. My hands were shaking, but I'd said everything I needed to say. The judge studied Garrett for a long moment. Then he spoke. Mr. Caldwell, I've reviewed the evidence in this case extensively. The prosecution has proven beyond reasonable doubt that you engaged in a systematic, calculated campaign to exploit and potentially murder your elderly aunt for financial gain. The text messages, financial records, and witness testimony paint a picture of someone who is manipulative, remorseless, and dangerous. Garrett's lawyer started to object, but the judge held up his hand. Your attorney argues that you were desperate, that you made poor choices under stress. But desperation doesn't explain 8 months of planning. Stress doesn't explain researching DNR orders and hospital safety protocols. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was premeditated exploitation of a vulnerable family member who trusted you. The judge looked at me, then back at Garrett. Furthermore, the evidence suggesting you may have committed similar crimes against your grandmother and another elderly victim is deeply troubling. While you haven't been charged with those deaths, the pattern of behavior is clear. You see elderly people as opportunities rather than human beings. He opened a folder, read from it. On the count of financial elder abuse, I sentence you to 5 years in state prison. On the count of forgery, 3 years consecutive. On the count of identity theft, 3 years consecutive. On the count of poisoning with intent to harm, for years consecutive. And on the count of conspiracy to commit murder, I sentence you to 10 years consecutive. I did the math in my head. 25 years. Total sentence, 25 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. You will also be required to pay full restitution of $200,000 to Mrs. Caldwell, though I recognize this may never be fully collected." Harold Caldwell sobbed loudly. Garrett's face had gone white. Additionally, the judge continued, "Upon release, you will be permanently barred from serving as power of attorney for anyone, from working in elder care, and from being alone with anyone over the age of 65. You will register as an elder abuse offender in whatever jurisdiction you reside." The judge closed his folder. "Mr. Caldwell, you betrayed your family, violated your aunt's trust, and attempted to commit one of the most heinous crimes imaginable, murdering a loved one for money. This court shows you the same mercy you showed Mrs. Caldwell when she was helpless in that hospital bed. None." The gavel came down. Guards approached Garrett to take him away. He looked at me one last time, and I saw it in his eyes. Not remorse, not apology, but resentment. He was angry that I'd survived, angry that I'd fought back, angry that he'd gotten caught. He would never admit what he'd done was wrong. He would never truly apologize. And that's when I finally let go of the last thread of hope that my nephew was still in there somewhere. He wasn't. Garrett Caldwell, the boy I'd known, was gone. Maybe he'd never really existed at all. As they let him out, Harold approached me. His face was ravaged with grief. "Marianne, his voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I should have seen it. After my mother died, I should have questioned." "It's not your fault," I said quietly. "Garrett fooled all of us. 25 years. He'll be 57 when he gets out." Harold wiped his eyes. "I know he deserves it. I know what he did was monstrous. But he's my son." "I know, and I did understand." Harold was losing his son the same way I'd lost my nephew, to choices and crimes and consequences that couldn't be undone. "Linda would be so ashamed," Harold whispered. "Linda would want him to face justice. And she'd want you to take care of yourself." I squeezed his arm briefly. "I don't hate you, Harold. You didn't do this." He nodded, unable to speak, and walked away. Patricia was immediately at my side. "How are you feeling?" "I don't know." And that was the truth. Relief, grief, exhaustion, vindication. All of it mixed together into something I couldn't name. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. This time, I stopped to talk to them. "Mrs. Caldwell, how do you feel about the sentence?" "I feel like justice was served. 25 years is appropriate for someone who systematically targeted elderly victims. Do you have anything to say to other seniors who might be facing exploitation?" I looked directly into the camera. "Trust your instincts. If a family member or caregiver starts isolating you, pressuring you to sign documents, or making you feel confused or burdensome, get help. Talk to a friend, call a lawyer, contact Adult Protective Services. You're not being paranoid. You are protecting yourself, and you deserve to be protected." "What's next for you?" "I'm expanding the Caldwell Foundation. We're opening 3 new chapters in other counties. We're training medical professionals to recognize elder abuse. And we're making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else."
The interviews lasted 20 minutes. Then Patricia drove me home, to my house, which still had a lien against it but was mine, to my street where I'd lived for 37 years, to my life that was damaged but not destroyed. That evening, sitting on my porch watching the sunset, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered it anyway. "Mrs. Caldwell? This is Sarah Chun. You don't know me, but I attended one of your classes 3 months ago." "Yes," I said cautiously. "I just wanted to tell you, my daughter was pressuring me to sign over my house to her, saying it was for estate planning. Something you said in that class made me suspicious, so I talked to a lawyer instead. Turns out my daughter was planning to sell the house and put me in a state facility. The lawyer helped me set up protections, and I confronted her." Sarah's voice shook. She admitted everything. Said she needed the money for her business. "Mrs. Caldwell, if I hadn't taken your class, I'd be homeless right now." My eyes filled with tears. "I'm so glad you protected yourself. Because you taught me how. Because you survived and decided to help others. You saved my life, Mrs. Caldwell." I just wanted you to know that. After she hung up, I sat on that porch and cried. Not sad tears, cleansing tears. Healing tears. Garrett had tried to destroy me. Instead, he'd created something bigger than both of us. Every person who took my class, every elderly victim who got help, every family that learned to recognize warning signs, that was my revenge. That was my victory. Not his sentence. Not watching him be led away in handcuffs. This. Survival turning into purpose. Trauma turning into protection for others. 3 days later, something arrived at my door. A large envelope, no return address. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a note. Mrs. Caldwell, my parents and I are horrified by what Garrett did. This doesn't fix anything, but maybe it helps. Please use it for your foundation. Make sure he can never do this to anyone else. Blake Torres. I stared at that check for a long time. $50,000 from the woman who'd helped Garrett plan my exploitation. Was it guilt money? Restitution? An attempt to buy forgiveness? I didn't know. But I deposited it into the foundation account anyway. Because it wasn't about Blake's motivations. It was about what I could do with it. How many people I could help. How many lives I could protect. Patricia came over that evening with Chinese food and wine. We sat in my living room, the same room where I'd served Garrett coffee, where he'd pretended to care while drugging me, and we toasted. To survival, Patricia said. To justice, I added. To the future, Chelsea said. She'd joined us after her shift, bringing flowers. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in 6 months, I felt something close to peace. The nightmare wasn't over completely. I still had financial recovery ahead, paying off the fraudulent debts, clearing the lien, rebuilding my credit. I still had moments of panic when someone knocked on my door unexpectedly. I still had nightmares about being paralyzed in that hospital bed. But I also had purpose. I had friends who'd risked everything for me. I had hundreds of seniors taking my classes, learning to protect themselves. I had a foundation growing beyond anything I'd imagined. And I had proof that even the darkest betrayal couldn't destroy someone who refused to stay down. Garrett would spend the next 15 years minimum in prison, thinking about his choices. Or more likely, resenting me for surviving, for fighting back, for being stronger than he'd calculated. Either way, he'd have plenty of time to think. And I'd have the rest of my life to live. 6 months after Garrett's sentencing, I stood in front of 300 people at the Riverside Convention Center. The Caldwell Foundation's first annual conference on elder abuse prevention had drawn attendees from 12 states. Social workers, lawyers, medical professionals, concerned family members, and survivors like me. My hip barely hurt anymore. Physical therapy had worked wonders, and I could walk without assistance. But the real healing had happened somewhere deeper, in places that medicine couldn't reach. 6 months ago, I told the audience, I was lying in a hospital bed, having just survived my nephew's attempt to have me killed for my inheritance. I was terrified, broken, and certain my life was over. But I was wrong. My old life was over. The life where I trusted blindly and believed family would never hurt me. That life died in that hospital room. I paused, looked out at the sea of faces. But a new life began too. A life where I understand that trust must be earned, that vulnerability requires protection, and that survival is only the first step. The second step is meaning. The third step is helping others. And that's why we're all here today. The conference was everything Patricia and I had dreamed of. Workshops on recognizing financial exploitation. Legal clinics offering free consultations. Support groups for survivors. Training sessions for medical professionals on spotting abuse. We'd even convinced the state legislature to send representatives to discuss strengthening elder protection laws. Donald gave a presentation on estate planning safeguards. Chelsea taught medical staff how to interview elderly patients privately about their home situations. And I taught the class I'd been perfecting for months, The Warning Signs I Missed, a Survivor's Guide. During the lunch break, a woman in her 70s approached me. She had kind eyes and nervous hands. Mrs. Caldwell? I'm Dorothy Brennan. I'm here because 6 weeks ago, My grandson asked me to sign power of attorney papers. Just like your nephew did. And I almost signed them. What stopped you? I asked. Your story. I read about your case in the newspaper, and something you said stuck with me: trust your instincts. I had this feeling in my gut that something was off about how much my grandson was pushing. So I went to a lawyer first. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. Turns out my grandson already had $30,000 in gambling debt and a plan to refinance my house to pay it off. The lawyer helped me set up safeguards. My grandson hasn't spoken to me since, but at least I still have my home. I hugged her, this stranger who'd become an unexpected sister in survival. You saved yourself, I told her. That's the most important thing. You listened to your instincts. Because you gave me permission to, Dorothy said. Your story gave me permission to doubt someone I loved. Throughout the day, I heard variations of that story over and over. People who'd recognized warning signs because of the Foundation's classes. Families who'd started difficult conversations about estate planning. Elderly people who'd set up safeguards before crisis hit. We'd helped over 800 people in 6 months. 800 potential victims who might have lost everything if they hadn't learned what to watch for. That evening, after the conference ended, Patricia and I went to dinner at the Italian restaurant downtown. The same one where Garrett had taken me to lunch and convinced me to sign those papers. I'd avoided it for months, but tonight felt right for reclaiming it. Thomas would be so proud of you, Patricia said over wine and pasta. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something that saves lives.
We did, I corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you.
Please.
You're the one standing up in front of hundreds of people telling your story, over and over. That takes courage I'm not sure I have. I thought about that word, courage. People kept using it to describe me. But I didn't feel courageous. I felt like someone who'd simply refused to let betrayal be the final word in her story. I ran into Harold last week, I said quietly. At the grocery store. Patricia's eyebrows rose. How did that go? Awkward at first. Then he thanked me. I swirled my wine glass. Said watching Garrett's trial made him realize how much he'd missed over the years. How his mother probably didn't die of natural causes like he'd thought. How he'd been blind to what his son really was. That must have been hard for him.
It was.
But he's in therapy now, processing it all. And he donated $10,000 to the foundation. Said it's what his mother would have wanted. Linda would have wanted that, Patricia agreed. She always believed in turning pain into purpose. After dinner, Patricia drove me home. My house looked the same as always. Porch light glowing, Japanese maple rustling in the breeze, solid and safe and mine. We'd finally cleared the fraudulent home equity lien after months of legal battles. The credit card debt was resolved. My accounts were protected with multiple layers of safeguards that even someone with power of attorney couldn't bypass. I was still down about $60,000 after restitution, legal fees, and uncovered costs. The money Garrett had spent on himself, vacations with Blake, gambling debts, expensive dinners, that was gone forever. But I had my house. I had my pension. I had enough. Want me to come in? Patricia asked. No, I'm good. I'll see you tomorrow for class setup. Call if you need anything. I will. I promise. I went inside, locked the door, and stood in my living room. This space had been violated by Garrett's presence, tainted by his betrayal. For months, I'd felt like a stranger in my own home. But tonight, it felt like mine again. I made tea, settled into Thomas's old armchair, and opened my laptop. 347 emails had come in during the conference, thank yous from attendees, requests for foundation materials, invitations to speak at other events, and stories from survivors who'd attended my sessions. One email stood out. The subject line read, "You saved my grandmother. Dear Mrs. Caldwell, my name is Marcus Webb. 3 months ago, my grandmother Ruth attended one of your classes at the Riverside Library. She came home and told me she needed to talk about something serious. She said your class made her realize that her caregiver was stealing from her. I didn't want to believe it. The caregiver had worked for Grandma for 2 years, seemed trustworthy. But Grandma insisted we check her accounts. Turns out the caregiver had stolen over $40,000 through small withdrawals over 18 months. We filed a police report. The caregiver was arrested and confessed to stealing from 3 other elderly clients too. She's awaiting trial now. Mrs. Caldwell, if my grandmother hadn't taken your class, if you hadn't taught her to recognize exploitation, she'd have lost everything. Her retirement savings, her house, her independence. You saved her life in every way that matters. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. But thank you, Marcus. I read the email 3 times, then saved it in a folder I'd created called Why We Fight. It joined dozens of similar messages, proof that survival could become salvation for others. My phone buzzed. A text from Chelsea. Just got word. Hospital system is implementing your elder abuse screening protocols next month. Every patient over 65 will be privately interviewed about their home situation. You're changing systems, Marianne. Not just individuals. Changing systems. That's what this had become. Not just teaching individuals to protect themselves, but changing how hospitals screened for abuse, how lawyers structured power of attorney documents, how law enforcement investigated financial exploitation. One person's nightmare turning into institutional reform. I thought about Garrett, sitting in a prison cell 2 hours north. Did he think about me? Did he regret his choices, or just regret getting caught? Did he understand that his attempt to destroy me had actually created something bigger than either of us? Probably not. Sociopaths rarely gained insight. He was likely focused on appeals, on getting his sentence reduced, on figuring out his next con for when he eventually got out. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Garrett's future was his to navigate. Mine was full of purpose, connection, and meaning. A year ago, I'd been signing power of attorney papers, trusting family blindly, living quietly in comfortable ignorance. Now I was traveling to conferences, teaching hundreds of people, appearing on local news to discuss elder abuse, working with legislators to strengthen protection laws. A year ago, I'd thought my life's important work was behind me. 43 years of teaching concluded, retirement stretching out like a quiet epilogue. Now I understood that everything before had been preparation for this. Every difficult parent I'd navigated, every budget crisis I'd managed, every problem student I'd helped, all of it had trained me for this moment. For standing up after betrayal and building something that mattered. If you've made it this far in Marianne's story, thank you for watching. Take a second to share your thoughts in the comments. Have you, or someone you know, ever dealt with family exploitation? What would you do in Marianne's situation? I read every comment, and your stories matter. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because stories like these need to be told. I finished my tea, closed my laptop, and walked to the mantel. There was a new photo there now. Me standing with Patricia and Chelsea at the foundation's grand opening, all 3 of us smiling. Beside it, a photo from the conference, me at the podium with 300 faces watching, listening, learning. And yes, there was still a photo of Thomas, and one of Linda from years ago. Family wasn't erased by betrayal. Good memories didn't disappear because bad ones arrived. I'd learned to hold both truths, that Garrett had betrayed me, and that I'd once loved him. That my trust had been violated, and that I could still choose to trust worthy people. That I'd been victimized, but I wasn't a victim. Survival wasn't a passive state. It was an active choice, made daily, sometimes hourly. Choose to get out of bed. Choose to face the fear. Choose to turn trauma into testimony, pain into purpose, betrayal into protection for others. The doorbell rang, startling me. Through the peephole, I saw a delivery driver with a large box. Package for Marianne Caldwell, he called. I opened the door cautiously, signed for it, and brought the box inside. The return address showed it was from the State Attorney General's office. Inside was a plaque. Presented to Marianne Caldwell and the Caldwell Foundation in recognition of exceptional service to elder abuse prevention. Your courage in speaking out has protected countless vulnerable citizens. State of California Attorney General's Office. I hung it on the wall beside my teaching awards from decades ago. Principal of the Year, 1998. Excellence in Education, 2003. Distinguished Service, 2009. And now this. A different kind of teaching, a different kind of service. My phone rang again. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Mrs. Caldwell? This is Amanda Rivers from the National Council on Aging. We'd like to invite you to speak at our national conference in Washington, D.C. next spring. Your work with the Caldwell Foundation has drawn attention from policymakers who want to learn from your experience. Washington, D.C. National Conference. Policymakers. A year ago, I'd been fighting to survive. Now, I was being invited to influence national policy. I'd be honored, I said. After hanging up, I sat back down in Thomas's chair and let myself feel everything. The grief for the nephew I'd lost, the pride in what I'd built, the fear that still sometimes woke me at night, the hope that carried me through each day. The clock on the mantel showed 10:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, it would be exactly 1 year since I'd signed those power of attorney papers that started this nightmare. I'd survived a year. Survived surgery, betrayal, exploitation, terror. Survived court proceedings and financial devastation and the destruction of trust. And I'd done more than survive. I'd built something that would outlast both Garrett's crime and my victimization. The foundation would continue after I was gone, protecting people I'd never meet, preventing tragedies I'd never hear about. That was legacy. Not money, not property, not inheritance. Impact. Protection. Meaning. At 11 p.m. exactly, I raised my teacup in a solitary toast. To Linda, I whispered, I hope I made you proud. I hope wherever you are, you know I didn't let your son destroy me. I took his worst and made it my best. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the oppressive silence of loneliness. It was the peaceful quiet of a life reclaimed, a home protected, a woman who'd faced darkness and chosen light. Tomorrow, I'd teach another class. I'd help more people protect themselves. I'd continue building the foundation, expanding our reach, changing systems. Tomorrow, I'd keep fighting. But tonight, I'd rest. In my home, in my chair, in the life I'd refused to let Garrett take from me. And when I finally went to bed, I didn't dream of hospital rooms or threatening voices or betrayal. I dreamed of classrooms full of students, elderly faces, young faces, all of them learning, all of them safer because of the knowledge I'd shared. I dreamed of Linda smiling at me, saying, "You did good, sis. You did real good." And I dreamed of Thomas, holding my hand on our porch, telling me what he'd told me 1,000 times during our marriage. "You're stronger than you know, Marianne. You always have been." When I woke up the next morning, sunlight streaming through my bedroom window, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. I felt free. Garrett had tried to end my life that day in the hospital. Instead, he'd given me a new one, a life with deeper purpose, stronger connections, and unshakable